Good evening, nonprofit management, my fellow students of nonprofit management. I'm reporting live to you tonight at 11:10 p.m. from my dining room. I just thought I'd make a shout out because all of you online students can relate to just fitting these into our busy schedules and lives. So I just wanted to share with you about my experience and the knowledge that I gained from reading the book Forces for Good by Leslie Crutchfield and Heather McLeod Grant. The subtitle of the book is The 6 Practices of High Impact Nonprofits. So the main theme of this book is really that nonprofits must be strategically situated in a complex web of relationships that expand far beyond the walls of the organization in order to generate impact for the greater good. And truly, this book has been such a culmination of my entire time in this master's program. So this is my second to last class. And the quote that actually came to mind when I first thought about this summary of the book was a quote that was found in chapter 1 of Worth's book on page 6, actually, you'll see here. Frances Hesselbein was the Girl Scouts CEO for many years. And this columnist tells the story that Hesselbein proceeded to rearrange the lunch table, creating a set of concentric circles radiating outwards, plates, cups, saucers, connected by knives, forks, and spoons. She pointed to a glass in the middle of the table and said, "I'm here." She may have had the title Chief Executive Officer, but her message was clear: I'm not on top of anything. And truly, this book is kind of the proof behind that quote that an effective executive director, effective leadership in the nonprofit realm is so interconnected, in that relationships outside of the organization are key to success. And so the way this book approaches the study and the research that came to that conclusion was by looking at 12 different organizations, and they did a very thorough study to evaluate and assess which were the most effective organizations to base the study off of. And they, throughout the book, it's just littered with case studies of these organizations. So I really do highly recommend you read it so that you can hear all of those, because I will not be able to get into it. But the 12 organizations are listed here, and I will spare you me just reading through them, but you can evaluate those. They were based on whether or not they created real social change, and if they're able to manufacture concrete outputs. And so, as the book title suggests, it's high impact nonprofits. So these are nonprofits that impacted not just the people in their reach, but entire fields and entire systems for the greater good. And from the study and from the stories and research they conducted with those 12 nonprofits, they were able to find 6 different practices that were true of all 12 at some level. And so number 1 is advocate and serve. So a lot of nonprofit organizations serve in some way. That's kind of a no-brainer. But the advocacy piece is so important, and they argue that that cannot be left out. Because if you want to truly change the system, you have to influence the political process. And so, a lot of organizations have fears about this because it's difficult to measure what is successful advocacy. Service, there are direct outcomes, people are affected and helped, but advocacy is just a never-ending feat. So that's one of the fears that people have. Also, they fear losing key donors and volunteers, because oftentimes when you get involved with the political system, there are strong opinions that are tied to that. And so some keys to success they acknowledge is to just engage in pragmatic, bipartisan solutions. And having this approach will work with whoever is empowered to effect change that relates to our organization. So you have to really take that carefully. The second point was make markets work. And there are 3 main ways that they suggest you can engage the corporate sector, which is so important because they have so much power and substantial resources that we ought to tap into it as the nonprofit sector where resources are slim. So the first of which is to change their practices to make them socially responsible. This is where the concept enlightened self-interest comes into play. Worth talks about it actually in chapter 11, where he talks about how companies make gifts not to have a direct or immediate benefit to their bottom line, but to help maintain a healthy society in which to do business. And so it's kind of looking at that bigger picture and helping them see how they can be socially responsible. The second of which is to partner with the business to access more resources. This is through programs like Gift in Kind, employee engagement, volunteerism. All of these things fit into the topic of strategic philanthropy, which is also mentioned in that same section in chapter 11 of the main text. And this is all about fitting in your fundraising efforts and your involvement with a corporation to fit into their larger strategy and business goals. And finally, an option is to run your own business to earn income. And they really make it clear this is not for everyone. Some nonprofits, this just isn't a wise option. So it's important to consider the risks and weigh the benefits before you engage in earned income as a nonprofit. Number 3, this is my the one I'm most passionate about, is inspire evangelists. This is all about building and sustaining strong communities, inspiring individuals to get behind the message and then share with their communities so that it becomes this complex web of supporters of your organization. So one of the points they talk about is messaging over marketing. In marketing, I thought this quote by Jim Balfance was genius. He's the CEO of City Year, which is one of the examples. He talks about is what marketing tells you is that it's all about segmentation. I'm in marketing, so that is so true. But in the social sector, we have to create a common ground. I thought that was genius. Another way to inspire evangelists is to create meaningful experiences. Another quote from the text says, "They are connected, inspired, and transformed in the process of working for a cause." The nonprofit helps to reinforce their innermost values and convert their beliefs into action. So they are not just passive consumers, but co-creators. What a powerful title to engage individuals with. And then the last thing is just creating opportunities for people to come together. So engage the alumni of the program. They're oftentimes the strongest evangelists because they have experienced the programming firsthand. Also, just hosting symposiums, conferences, events for people to come together and just to let that energy and that inspiration build, because when we come together, amazing things happen. It's also really important to view other nonprofits as partners and collaborators and not competition. So number 4 is to nurture nonprofit networks. The mindset is so key here. And there's 4 main tactics to nurture nonprofit networks as identified by the text. Number 1 is grow the pie. So fundraise not just for yourself, but for those who are trying to accomplish the same thing you are. Number 2 is share your knowledge. So go to events, go to conferences, and share about the efficient ways you've learned to reach those in your community. 3, develop leadership. So invest in young individuals who are looking to go into nonprofit management, build them up, and even if they go out to another organization, you're still advancing the cause. So seek out local colleges and even people inside the organization. Who can you develop in their leadership? And number 4 is work in coalitions. So work together, work with other nonprofits, and share the successes. Number 5 is the master art of adaptation. So you'll notice the first 4 we talked about were all outward focused. So this is the first of the last 2, which is more looking at the inside of your organization. Now, in the master text, Worth talks about on page 192 and 193, that it's very typical that newer organizations are going to be really quick to adapt and collaborate with other organizations and to find more outcome-based adaptability, where older organizations are going to focus more on some of the internal adaptations such as team building, leadership. Media relations would be more external, but that's just some trends that he noted that I thought would be good to add as well to this conversation. But there are 4 stages of adaptation that they identify in Forces for Good. The first of which is listen to the environment. So this is just taking in the information that already is out there. Number 2 is to experiment and innovate. Now, this is where you want to engage your free spirits of the organization. They love to brainstorm and think outside the box, so bring them in, give them a role in this. The next is evaluate and learn. So this is where we let the data talk for itself. We put some of those ideas to practice, to the test, and we see, are these doing what we hope they are doing? And this is where you can bring in your MBAs. And these are your really like data-driven individuals in the organization. And so even through this process, you can engage different leadership types and styles so that everybody gets a role to play. And then based on the data, you can modify those programs and plans, let them run, and then you want to just always be listening to the environment and seeing how that is playing out. So data really is the key. It should be the driver behind the decisions of what programs stay, what go, how we use our time, how we don't use our time. All of that should be informed by the data. And last but not least, the 6th practice is to share leadership. Now, this has been kind of talked on in different sections, but one of the points that the text made is that COOs are invaluable because they allow the CEOs to do steps 1 through 4, which are all outward facing. And so COOs are going to be able to concentrate on the programming inside of the organization. It's also really important to have strong boards and executive teams, to have a plan in place for when your leadership turns over, when retirement happens, and then also to create non-management leadership opportunities. So often in nonprofit world, management is the only way to climb the ladder, but to make space for scientists and researchers and programmers to step into leadership roles without having to go toward management. And then most importantly, a CEO must be gifted at leveraging. This was mentioned early on in Forces for Good. It's also touched on by Worth in the master text. And he talks about CEOs having a gift, a mix of technical knowledge, human skills, and conceptual skills. So they can work with theories, they can work with people, they can work with the tasks and the specifics of the profession. So the CEO is such an important role. And I would push back because the text kind of talks about just being open to the CEO being not narrowing it down to a certain type of leadership style, but I do think that there are crucial skills they must possess. And because of this text, everything's pointing to outward networking and relationship building. And so, in my opinion, if they do not have those skills, they're just probably not fit to be a CEO of an organization. Because the whole point of leverage is to influence and transform others to do more with less. So that's a quick run through. I'm already running short on time, but that's a quick run through of the 6 main points touched in the text. Now, I agree so much, and it's been, I've mentioned some of my opinions and my feedback throughout, but some of the pieces that I most agree with is that messaging matters. It's not just about marketing. It's about creating this clear message that people can get behind, whether it is the individuals, whether it's corporations, whether it's the government. The way you speak about yourself is going to be key when you are forging those external relationships. The other thing is relationship is everything. And so that kind of feeds right into that point. But there are a couple of things that I think could have been improved. I think really my main argument is that there should be an update of this text, just because it's been several years since it was published. Even the last 2 years alone, with the pandemic, that has revolutionized the nonprofit world, and it's been kind of a sink or swim environment. So I just wonder if any of the findings would change or adapt based on the current day and age we live in. But I also just think it was interesting. So clearly, the organizations were chosen because they were high impact, which meant they reached outside of the walls of their programming. But I feel that impacted greatly the ratio of the six practices, 4 of which were external, 2 of which were internal. And so I just did a side by side between the chapters in that book and the chapters in the Worth text. And 5 of the 17 in that book were external related. And now that is a, broad sweeping book that really takes a 60,000 foot look at nonprofit management. But it seems like they should better align. And so I just wonder if there was a different framework placed on the study, if the results would have been different. So I just wanted to conclude with this quote that struck me at the end of the book. The solution to society's most pressing problems lie in the collective, not in any single institution. And that's what this book is all about. It's about partnering together, looking outside, bringing anybody in who has the same vision to rally behind it and to make as big of an impact as possible. And so this was a great text to serve as kind of a bookend and a capstone to my nonprofit management experience. So thank you for coming along for the ride. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at calmanmj@grace.edu. Thanks so much.